Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome in, welcome back. Now, I don't know if you all are a part of the same trends on TikTok, but I've had this recent trend come up where it's a video of a thirst trap and it gets immediately interrupted by a dinosaur edit. It's usually to like a 3 A's Grace song or like an Avenged Sevenfold song. I don't know, but they're so freaking cool. And if there's one thing that I love more than Pokemon, is dinosaurs. And luckily, Pokemon decided to fuse my two hyperfixations by making the fossil Pokemon. And honestly, the fossil Pokemon are some of my favorite designs in all of Pokemon. The blend of cartoony aspects with the real world inspirations for each of the Pokemon. And the more I got to thinking about it, I started wondering, what are the real life influences for all the fossil Pokemon? So, for today, I want you to take a little journey with me as we go through and look at every single fossil Pokemon and every single one of their inspirations. Anyway, let's get started. First up is one of the OGs, my boy, Aerodactyl. One of my favorite designs. Now, obviously these guys are based on pterosaurs, which were ancient flying reptiles that soared over the earth, usually during the Mesozoic era, so that was from the late Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous. And showing them side by side, there's a lot of features that they share together, such as some of the sharper features, the aerodynamic body, their wings, even the tail on certain species of it. Now, pterosaurs were actually one of the earliest vertebrates known to have powered flight, which means they were able to basically flap their wings and create a motion to give themselves flight. And funnily enough, Aerodactyl has an inspiration in paleontology, as there was a paleontologist that named a genus of pterodactyl after Aerodactyl. I'm not joking, there's literally a genus called Aerodactylus, and he named it because he wanted to get the next generation of kids into paleontology. Honestly, it's one of my favorite cute little things about science, that they can just name an animal whatever. Next up, we have Kabuto and we have Kabutops. Now, Kabuto is based off of the ancient arthropod called the Trilobite. And looking at Trilobite, you can see where they got the iconic shape of Kabuto's shell. And funnily enough, eventually Trilobites did evolve into horseshoe crabs, which are closer to Kabuto's design. Now, Kabutops is a bit more in the speculative category, as while he could be based off of a Trilobite as well, I believe it's more loosely based on, oh, I'm going to fuck this up when I try to pronounce it, Jackalopterus? Fuck it, I'm throwing the name up here, you can look at it. These were basically ancient sea scorpions, and potentially the largest arthropod to have ever lived. Looking at them both, it makes a little bit more sense that Kabutops takes after the ancient sea scorpion, just because of Kabutops having the sickle-like hands, which are similar to the scorpion's claws, as well as them having a similar head shape, so while it might not be as direct, I feel this is a better comparison for Kabutops than a Trilobite. And finally, to round out the Gen 1 fossil Pokemon, we have Omanite and Omastar. I fucking love these guys the most, honestly. The Lord Helix meme back in the day was so iconic that it just ingrained Omanite's image into my head. But these guys, funnily enough, are based off of ammonites. Ammonites were some of the first ancient marine mollusks, with their iconic coiled spiral shell making up the same exact shell for Omanite and Omastar. These mollusks also had shells that developed into kind of a spiral horn tip, and for the first two gens, we only had these guys for fossil Pokemon. But then, Gen 3 came out and dropped two more bangers. First, let's talk about Anorith and Armaldo. Now, Anorith is directly based on Anomalocaris, and you can tell by the mandibles, the way it swims, heck, even the eye shape. Now, Anomalocaris was the Cambrian period's biggest and first predator, feasting on trilobites by crushing their shells between the mandibles on its mouth. So yeah, this little guy was probably crushing Kabuto in his mouth before, the extinction event. Now for Armaldo, he shares aspects of the Anomalocaris, such as the fins and the eyes, but it mentions he goes on the land, which made me think, and I know I already said Kabutops was this, I also believe he is a part of, oh, I'm gonna fuck this name up too, Eopterids, or sea scorpions. Now obviously that's just because they have like sharp mouths and the large bladed hands, which made me think that way. Though looking back at it now, I guess it could still be Anomalocaris. Again, some of these are a little bit more loosely based on ancient creatures. Luckily, they made it easier on me with this next set, Lileep and Cradily. Now, these two are based on a singular prehistoric sea plant known as crinoids, sharing most of the features with the ones that are called sea lilies that attach to the sea bottom as their stalk extends down to keep them in place. Now, while these plants are alive today, they were extremely prominent in the mid-Paleozoic era to the Jurassic period. Their leaf-like appendages being known as feeding arms, which pull food into their mouth located on the surface. So yeah, Lileep and Cradily's faces are actually their mouths, with their eyes poking through it. Honestly, out of all the fossil Pokemon I'm going to talk about, Cradily and Lileep have probably the most similarities to the ancient creature they are based on. And luckily, Gen 4 gave us even more peak fossil Pokemon. Let's talk about Cranidos and Rampardos. These two guys are based off of Pachycephalosaurs. Now, these guys are another one-to-one similarity with the ancient creature they're based on. Like, seriously, the big iconic domed head being a big part of it, being the headbutt Pokemon. Now, the Pachycephalus is literally named Thick-Headed Lizard for a reason. These guys have insane headbutting power. And, fun fact, we're actually one of the last non-avian dinosaurs. God, I can just imagine either from the Pokemon or the dinosaur itself, that headbutt's gotta be like a fucking Mack truck. Then there's Shieldon and Bastion. These two are an example of Ceratopsian dinosaurs. Honestly, trying to narrow them down was really hard. The most I can say is that they're closest to the Chasmosaurs. God, I know I butchered it. I'm gonna put it up here again so you can read it. Honestly, Chasmosaur was probably the best one I could pick, since they were known for their very large frills and very short horns. And Shieldon and Bastion capture these features really well, with their literal shield face. Plus, Shieldon has a beak, which also represents Chasmosaurus, as its best attacking feature was the beak it held. Now we move on to Gen 5, where we get another set of banger fossil Pokemon. I swear to God, every gen just made them better and better. First up is Tirtuga and Caracosta. These guys are based off the ancient marine turtle, specifically Archelion. The Archelion was the biggest turtle ever documented, and looking at side by side, I said the shells are pretty similar for it and Tirtuga, and then Caracosta having the large fins that it shared as well. Next up, we got Archon and Archeops. These both representing the in-between stage where Pokemon dinosaurs kind of had that avian era. These guys are based off of Archaeopteryx, which Archaeopteryx lived in the late Jurassic around 150 million years ago and are the oldest birds known to men. Much like Archaeopteryx, Archon and Archeops share that feature of the tailed feathers, as well as having the head shape, clawed feet, even the sharp teeth that Archaeopteryx had. And Archaeopteryx was the first bird that could fly, leading to the inclusion of the dual type of rock and flying. Moving on from Gen 5, we got Gen 6. That includes Tyrunt and Tyrantrum, and then Amara and Aurorus. Starting up with Tyrunt and Tyrantrum, it's obviously the T-Rex. There's literally a picture of them with the T-Rex in the Pokemon Museum. Like, come on. Don't get me wrong, I thought it was Carnotaurus, but no, I looked at this, and yeah, it's T-Rex. So yeah, T-Rex was a genus of theropod dinosaur, the greatest predator of all time. Side by side, they're insanely similar. Then there's Amara and Aurorus. Now these guys are based off the sauropod family, and honestly, they could be based off of any of them, because I mean, honestly, sauropods weren't that different. But I feel they're more based off of Amargasaurus out of all of them. The Amargasaurus lived in the early Cretaceous period, and were some of the smaller sauropods out of all of them. The reason I compared them to the Amargasaurus is simply because of the dorsal fins that Amargasaurus had, because Aurora's sails are actually bone, as it was proven again by the Pokemon Museum. Bet that pisses you off, right? It fucking made me angry. Like, dude, that's clearly cartilage. It would clearly degrade, but no, apparently it's bone. Alright. And finally, last but not least, we have Gen 8, which gave us 4 amazing fossil Pokemon, those being Dracozolt, Dracovish, Arctozolt, and Arctovish. Now, these fossil Pokemon were actually based off of an event, not a specific ancient creature. It was one of my first videos, so I'll just do a quick recap. Basically, there was something called the Bone Wars, which was a feud between two paleontologists, Edward Drinker Cope and Charles Marsh. This feud included explosions, espionage, robbery, defamation. Basically, they were going no holds barred to make sure that one looked worse than the other. And these Pokemon are based off of the reality that on multiple occasions, they put together skeletons of dinosaurs wrong, either using different bones from other skeletons or putting them in the wrong place. That's why you basically make a Punnett square using 4 different pieces to create any of the 4. But if we wanted to give them real specifics, with Dracovish and Arctovish, I would say they take on a lot of aspects from the Dunkleostasis, which is a vicious fish from the Devonian period with an insane bite force that could literally tear through fucking metal. I mean, that thing and Jackie Kennedy were going through sheet metal like fucking crazy, apparently. While Dracozolt and Arctozolt having aspects of a Dromaeosaur, as they were smaller raptors / birds. And meanwhile, their bodies either having a form of some fish or some theropod. Even though, honestly, it seems like there's no top to the theropod, as Dracovish is just the legs and the tail, and then Arctozolt has another form of the tail. So, yeah, there's no real idea of what they are. But genuinely, these are my favorite designs of all the fossil Pokemon. They're so fun, and they take a representation of an event, not just an ancient creature, so you can go way more skewed and way more cartoony with some of the aspects. And yeah, I mean, Dracovish was one of the most like OP Pokemon for a hot minute. Like if I got hit with Fishious Rend when Dracovish was out, I was going to fucking scream and jump out of a window. But yeah, that's basically all the fossil Pokemon and everything they're based off of. There's stuff like Mamoswine and different stuff like that that are based off of mammoths, but they're not fossil Pokemon, so I exclude them. I really hope that Pokemon decides to make more fossil Pokemon. I don't know why I love it so much, but it's just a really fun design that they can do. And there are so many ancient creatures that they can base all their fossil Pokemon off of. It seems almost nigh infinite that they could do with this. But yeah, at the end of the day, which one's your favorite? Do you like fossil Pokemon? Or what's your favorite ancient creature that fossil Pokemon's based off of? Either way, my name's Arzy. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a wonderful day.